You are now locked into Radio Juxtapoz, the home of contemporary art and culture conversation. Coming up today.
I just said fuck it and I snapped, and I just decided that we were going to take a stand. I just didn't care. It was time for people to speak up and do something, and we did some pretty amazing fundraising. We did a lot of awareness, and we drove a lot of people away, but at the same time we woke up a lot of people, and a lot of people to this day respect us for that, and we'll always do that.
This is Radio Juxtapoz.
Seems like a lifetime ago, but remember when we were all excited to see the back of 2020 for being, well, just a bit of a dick? In waltzes 2021 with all the hopes of a fresh start. Within a week, we've got a space cowboy leading an insurrection at the Capitol with a band of not so merry men. A weird start. What I'm trying to say here is Happy New Year. Today we're in conversation with a stalwart of the very scene that birthed Juxtapoz magazine. In partnership with his wife Sean, our guest today has been leading the charge of a very different kind of movement, pushing new contemporary art into new and exciting directions since 2005. Today on Radio Juxtapoz, we're in conversation with art collector and co-owner of LA-based Thinkspace gallery, Andrew Hosner. So join us as Andrew recounts his 16 years of thriving in the gallery world. He tells us all about his big move to a new space. He tells us some very candid thoughts on new collectors, and most notably, the story of the guy that once set himself on fire outside of one of their shows. I don't usually do this, but just a little heads up, there is some pretty colourful use of the English language in this episode, so if you are looking to teach your kids some new words, then make sure they're sitting close to the speakers. As always, thanks for dialing in with us at Radio Juxtapoz. It means a lot to Evan and myself just to get messages, feedback and support from you. If there's anyone you'd love to hear us interview this year, then make sure you let us know on Instagram, our new home at Radio Juxtapoz. Just for old time's sake, after the interview with Andrew, there's a little bit of bonus content at the end with Evan and myself. Enjoy the show.
Andrew, if you have to do a podcast with like art behind you, because like it's like you're with a collector or anything, what art are you putting behind you right now?
I usually just sit on my sofa, and then we have like a huge array of works behind us, like trying to think what's there. There's like a really big piece from Javier Calleja and a really big piece from Jeffrey Chung, and you can see our Banksy and a few other things.
You've been collecting for a few years though. So how many pieces do you reckon you've got in your private collection?
Yeah, this is good.
We've been really bad in terms of cataloging it ourselves, which is funny since we tell people to do it themselves. We'll have an intern or maybe make it into a numerous weekend project one of these days, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna guess 700 to 800 pieces. Not counting prints. We probably have that many prints too.
Do you remember the first thing you bought?
As an original together with my wife, we do. It was a small Jeff Soto piece from his big installation at BLK MRKT, which oddly enough was the gallery that we would we would eventually take over many years later. And then we had each bought a number of prints between ourselves, and Sean had even had a couple small OGs from some local artists, but that was my first original of any kind, and the first that kind of started the Hosner collection, I guess, as you could say, between my wife Sean and I.
And what's the last piece you bought?
Just the other day. I'd have to look it up. It was a small upcoming artist from Japan that just caught my eye on a link of a link on Instagram, and she was selling some small works, and I bought a little 4x6 from her. Really cool little piece. I think Sasha just had her in his Universes show, his third one.
Of course he did.
But her name is escaping me. And then just got this morning, actually just before I left, I got the new Javier Calleja of Vases that came out from Case. So it was a good mail day already. So yeah.
What got you into collecting?
We always both had an eye for art, and when my wife came over to see me for the first time, when we were starting to get to know each other as we were beginning to date, she came over to my apartment in Philadelphia when I used to work back at Relapse Records, like a grindcore metal label back in the day, and my whole house was just filled with like framed Mucha prints. and dolly prints. And she was just like, oh, I thought I was coming to a metalhead's house. And I'm like, we are, but I got some class. And then, you know, we kind of connected on, you know, even more so with the art and whatnot. And then when I eventually moved out to California, one of the things we started to do to kind of have fun was we would go to flea markets on Sundays to kind of collect old antique radios that we were into when we still had space for those. And we started going out to art shows really regularly on Saturday, which eventually led us to meeting LC, who does Cannibal Flower, who is our partner now in the space. So that's kind of just like it was really just organic, natural. We never had a plan to open a gallery. And when we, you know, talked about opening a gallery, I think we all thought it was just going to be something fun to do for that summer. There was never a 5-year plan. And then things just really started to just take off, and we just rode the wave, and we're still riding the wave now 16 years later. So it's kind of crazy.
But you're talking about like a particular era of Los Angeles that was pretty special. It feels like when I hear stories about Los Angeles at that time, there's this sort of smile on people's faces, and they know it was special. But for you, like, what was it that just like made all these figures and all these important people sort of like resonate?
No, it's wild, and it's like when you look back and watch movies from the 70s and 80s and watch that scene, and now you look back at like the late 90s and the early 2000s here, you kind of get the same fondness because it's just not the same anymore. It was just fresh, it was young, it was naive. You didn't have like, the internet wasn't really a thing, you know, you didn't have the Instagram beast on your back making you feel you had to post every day as an artist and things like that. And it was just the sheer joy of discovery, you know. It was just like back in tape collecting or anything back in the metal days or anything like that, you know. It just wasn't shoved down your throat, and you weren't chasing someone else's, you know, ideas of what's cool, which is what's become on Instagram, you know. It's like no one really has their own vision anymore as a collector, sadly. I mean, many do, but there's many more that don't. And it was just much more of it was just way, 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 way different. There was a lot more galleries that were all bubbling under, and there was just a lot more of a community aspect. Not that there isn't now, it's just changed. There's a lot of different players in the scene. The world itself, in terms of social networking and everything, has definitely changed things in a big way. I guess it was just more, I don't know, just, it's hard to put into one word, but it was a special, special time. And people like Greg Escalante used to be like the belle of the ball and stuff like that. And just him being gone from some of these big events is, you know, noticeably a change, you know, because his spirit's not there and stuff like that. And a lot of the people that were kind of the stalwarts of the scene have now gotten much, much bigger and aren't out as much, kind of being, you know, part of it, or have moved away like Ryden. Are getting older like Robert and Suzanne, who don't come out as much anymore. And it's just changed. But it's also, you know, just as vibrant and just as alive and just as crazy now, not, you know, minus this past year of bullshit. So it's just different degrees, I guess you could say. But it was a special, special time that I definitely consider myself blessed to have been a part of, in terms of being a collector, in terms of being a fan and meeting some of these people, and like just really just amazing moments. I mean, I just remember like meeting Todd Shore at this like crazy little event at the Beach House on Venice, where they used to do like art events, and it was with Ozgemios for the launch of something they were doing with, I believe, Nike at the time, might have been Adidas. And he was just hanging out, and we just sat down and got to shooting the shit, and he probably spent an hour and a half drawing this insane like monster with a fez hat. In my sketchbook that I used to carry around, we've got like 7 or 8 just sketchbooks filled of craziness, which I feel bad doing now, since there's so many people kind of lurking about now that just do it for profit and go right home and throw them up on eBay. And an artist isn't necessarily going to probably say no to me if I ask, but then all of a sudden, if he starts doing it for me, I know there's going to be a line of, you know, people behind him, and then all of a sudden he's just drawing for his entire opening. So I don't do it as much as I used to. It's nicer to kind of have it out at like special events behind the scenes, like we used to with Urban Nation and just things of that nature, mural festivals, powwows, and stuff like that, where it's more intimate. I mean, I can't imagine Todd doing that for anybody these days, you know. So it's just like special little moments in time where it was just naive isn't the right word, but it was just more innocent, I guess. I don't think we would be where we are at or would have the footing that we do if we didn't launch at that time.
How did you find your way into this then?
Like the impetus, I guess you could say, of things. I touched on it in a minute when I was just yattering, but in the grand scheme of things, we had probably at that point been buying pretty heavily through a lot of galleries that we respected, like Mary Kanowski and BLK MRKT and Copro, and we're going to Cannibal Flower and Create Fixate, which were two kind of underground pop-up once-a-month art raves that would draw, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 people, have all sorts of crazy kind of bands on the cutting edge that you'd get to check out, not to mention just insane performance artwork, and just like and both places encouraged, like, you know, if you were an artist to dress up in costume, you'd get in for free and, you know, get your first beer for free, which for an artist is like, fuck, you know, forget about it. So it would just be like this scene that was like unheard of. I mean, just really, really crazy scene. And that was strong for about 10 years. And we had been going at that point for a few, and knew the history of it and everything. And I think it was the summer or the fall of like 2004, the spring of 2005. It was the spring of 2005 that LC got this little bitty space that he had called the Art Annex off of Melrose, right around the corner from Joe Hahn's Suru, little boutique that he was running at the time. And he had been rocking it for a few months, and LC's vision and passion is, you know, arts and music, and we definitely were coming from, you know, 10 plus years each in marketing and sales in the music industry. And when we went over to check out the space, we could tell it's just, he had so many artists that were bubbling under and that were starting to get handpicked from, you know, all of his exposure and development, like by new galleries that were starting to open up, like Gallery 1988 had just opened up. And Jensen and Katie were at all the early shows too, and like watching people and picking people, and Joe Ledbetter and Luke Chu and Thomas Hahn, and a lot of those artists came out of Cannibal Flower and went on to become pretty popular in the early days via 1988, and, you know, are very popular still to this day. We started realizing that there was just such a wealth of talent there and not enough galleries to really kind of take things to the next level. And at the same time, Elle was trying to do something with his art annex, but just didn't have, you know, the I guess the wherewithal to kind of really get things rocking on the terms of just like making it an international thing and getting it up on social networks and making a website and this, that, and the other thing. And we were hanging out one day having a smoke and having some beers at the space after we had bought a piece from Ikundayo, and an artist that we still work with to this day from Hawaii that's just incredible. And a mutual friend and artist who has become a pretty popular curator with the Suggestivism series, Nathan Spohr, kind of just threw out the notion of, you know, we should all work together. And we started vibing on that. And at the time, Nathan was doing all the art direction for Cannibal Flower, had designed their logo, was doing their website and everything. And we just started shooting the shit. And we had also, for probably the past couple years prior to that meeting, been developing our website. That was kind of like a blog called sourharvest.com. That's still our blog to this day. But back then, Juxtapoz was a GeoCities website. It was updated like once every 6 months.
Hey!
Yeah, it was before you. No, that was the days of like barren websites. Like there was nothing. Like every site that you can think of right now, Hypebeast.
Yeah, we didn't really start pushing hard on the web until I kind of came on, because I was the young one who that was what I was doing, so it made sense.
Oh, and everyone had a GeoCities website. I mean, this is 20 years ago, I'm saying. So I mean, yeah. It's like so we started.
Did we
like
even have a website
blog
20 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah, no, you guys did. But that's what I'm saying. It was like updated like once every 6 months. I mean, that was back in the day when if you wanted to know what was going on, you had to look at the little bitty listings in the back of Juxtapoz that were
for sure.
printed at like 6 font. At the bottom of the opening night photos, and be like, oh fuck, what the hell's going on? And usually like half of them would have already happened because the mag came out a little later. You found it late because it wasn't as readily available as it is now. Yeah. So we started, because I kept these like very anal like lists of like openings, because I was becoming pretty hardcore. My wife and I were becoming pretty hardcore on the collector front. We didn't want to miss anything. And a friend at Relapse at the time, the label I worked at that did our websites and everything, was into art too, and I would constantly give him this list, and he was like, man, we should put this up so more people can enjoy it. And I was like, fuck, sure. And I think maybe a week prior, I had just been to a little show from Brendan Monroe at this old gallery named Junk out in Silver Lake, and picked up his new zine and a little piece from him. And his zine was called Sour Harvest. And it just resonated with me, and I wanted something quirky and weird and didn't like really scream anything specific. And we were pretty good friends with him, so I called him up and I was like, hey man, do you mind if I call my blog about art Sour Harvest, and would you draw a little logo with one of your little sour characters? And he was super, super down, and we met like a week later and, you know, did the do. And then I gave all that to my designer dude at my record label I was working at, and he created the website. And then we decided that each week I should feature like a different artist as like a masthead and talk about them a little bit. And we got going on that, and within about a year we had about 5,000 people on the mailing list that would be signing up to see what the hell was going on in the LA art world. And 1988 started putting our logo on the back of the website and kind of saying like, hey, for everything in the LA art world, check out Sour Harvest. So it was like really building. And people would come up to my wife and I at like underground events and be like, oh, we're here because of you guys. We heard about it on Sour Harvest. And it was wild. So we were starting to develop this like natural kind of community. And LC was developing a nice patron base over at Cannibal Flower. So when we combined the two, and we had our first show November 2005, it just like put us in the red right away. We just started clicking, or the black, whatever the good one is.
The black, I think.
There we go. Put us in the black right away. We had Mirror One doing a huge mural on the outside on one side. Buff Monster was painting the back of our gallery. LC was spinning out in the back parking lot because we were in this like unique little spot right near the alleyways where all the famous Melrose graffiti is. And we just kind of, I'm gonna say, we all guess around 1,000 people showed up. It was bananas. And we sold almost everything, and it just like got tons of new people on the mailing list. And a guy caught on fire outside as I was getting high with Anthony Osgang, and we had these candles inside.
Wait, I was gonna say you can't just gloss.
No, okay, no, I can't gloss over. Okay, so I'm sitting outside, and me and Anthony Osgang are right out front of the window with LC, my partner, and we're doing one hits. And there's this guy who's a local like wino. Art gallery opening wino. Everyone has them. LA has many. They could almost be done as a portrait series by somebody. I think that'd be amazing. I gotta give that idea to somebody, because everyone knows who the fuck these guys are, man. They just travel around by bus, and they're sloshed by like 6, and they ride it out till 9, because they do all like the 4 to 6 openings, and then they do the 6 to 8 openings, and then they do the 8 to 11 openings, and they're just like, but genius if you're gonna do that.
That's Carlo and I in New York when we're in town together. By about 8 o'clock at night, we're just kind of drunk and looking for the next free. I've been it.
No, for sure. That's, a lot of people do. We kept telling them not to sit near these candles that we had on the ledge. We're like, don't sit near them, don't sit near them. We went outside, evidently my wife was in the back, so there was no one keeping an eye on him. And he sat down next to the candle, and it was November, like I said, so for California it was cold, so he had exactly. In air quotes, cold, and his winter jacket caught, and it was just like one of those old, like, big blue puffy ones, and it's just kind of like slowly going up the sleeve.
He didn't realize this?
Osgang takes a hit. No, he was completely oblivious to it. Osgang takes a hit, looks at us, looks at the dude, and we and LC are like not quite visually cued in just yet, and he looks at us and goes, that dude's on fire. And I look at LC, and we look at each other, and LC goes in there, and he starts patting him out, and the dude's still oblivious to it. We basically kick him out for being a drunk, and he like wanders off, and I still to this day don't think that dude ever knew he was on fire. It was just so comical. And maybe 10-15 minutes after that, there was this ruckus going on in the back, and we realized that the porn star that Buff Monster was dating at the time had decided to help him with the fills, and had climbed up on top of like the little air conditioner cage that was above our back door, and was basically kind of like had a brush as a tail and was wagging it, and the brush was being held in a very unique way. And the neighbors across the street that were lived on a balcony were watching the show and screaming and hooting and hollering, and it was a crazy, crazy scene that to this day many people still talk about.
What I'm hearing here, and this makes a lot of sense for like what Thinkspace has become today. You always have wanted to bring community with you wherever you go. And like that's part of like the museum curation that you do, that's part of the shows that you do. It's all about, it's not just one, it's a scene, and it's a movement, and it's a group of people doing this together. You've always been really democratic in that way. So the ethos has been there since day one.
Definitely. I mean, and a lot of that comes from, our love of what LC was doing with Cannibal Flower, and just our love of just those early days when it was more about community. Back then, I mean, we for probably 4 or 5 summers, we did what we called an art BQ, and Luke Chu did the flyers for it, and our house would become like this just nexus of creativity. I mean, we'd have 100 to 150 people over, but it was all like the VIP underground, like top of the top artists, all the cool collectors, the movers and shakers, you know, the behind the scene folks that made LA, you know, what it was in the 2000 to 2010 scene. And a lot of people are like, why don't you do those anymore? And it's like, well, it's not the same anymore. And now it would be politics. Like, some people would be considered like, oh my God, you're going to go to Thinkspace. Oh my God, what are you talking to them? Oh! You know, and so it's like, there's so much competition and backstabbing now that I just don't think it could ever happen.
Just staying on that, what changed?
I mean, honestly, from our perspective and how things changed in terms of just like interactions with people and other galleries and stuff like that, success definitely was the point when it really started to change for us. I'm going to be honest. Like year 5 or 6 for us, when it was obvious that we weren't going away and that we were starting to become actually a little bit of a force, and, you know, started getting some legs, I guess, under us. That was right around the time that the internet really started taking off, and my wife and I were surrounded by, you know, young kids that, you know, every day we met with at our day jobs in the music industry that were at the cutting edge of what the hell was going on with MySpace and, you know, everything that was taking off back then, LiveJournal and all that. So we were very much like on that shit and on Instagram when it launched and things of that nature, where a lot of galleries were very, very, you know, 2-3 years later, you know, figuring out that it was cool once they saw their kids on it all the time and stuff like that. Things like that definitely started to change the overall nexus of like when we would interact with people, I guess you could say. But at the same time, that's also what kind of reinforced our commitment to making sure that there was always somebody that was going to try to, you know, hold fast and toe the community line and always, you know, kind of be there for the artist just coming out of school, but at the same time, hopefully trying to lead that artist that's been with us for 10 years or just came to us from another gallery and, you know, is entering that 15th to 20th year and mid-career type guy. We pride ourselves on having that balance to be able to work with both and be able to help guide both. And over the last, you know, 5 years, we've definitely taken it up many notches in terms of doing things with several institutions and, you know, starting to be a much more of a player with the fairs that we work with and things of that nature. But at the same time, still always trying to not play Sophie's Choice, which so many galleries do, and only, you know, focus on their top, I don't know, 15-20% of folks, and the rest just kind of, you know, are there, I guess you could speak. And even if that's only a small piece here or there, at least we're still, you know, doing what we can to fly the flag of, you know, just... I think new contemporary is almost becoming an old term now. I mean, it's just all becoming contemporary art again. And I'll let the history books ultimately, you know, call it what they want to call it. We're just rocking what we like and showing what we want to show. And people ask me all the time who we choose and how we choose. And it's just who we would want to put on our walls as our tastes develop and grow and get exposed to new things around the world. And, you know, artists are like, check this out. And, you know, collectors are... You know, I've become super good friends with a number of collectors on Instagram now who I probably spend far too much time DMing with on a regular daily basis, if you ask my wife. Especially without having openings now, it's just like, man, it's like if I can spend an hour or so a day chatting with some friends around the world about art and getting exposed to cool shit that I wouldn't otherwise, and at the same time, I think ingratiating them to the fact that I am and always will be a collector first and a gallerist second, and I say that all the time, I will always, like, you know... I've left our shows to go check out a show that's down the street and try to buy a piece in Culver City when we were in a little bit more of a gallery cluster, because I'm like, I'll be gone for like 20 minutes, but they're not giving me the preview, and I'll be like, it's just because it's like the bug in me is strong, and we were always we started out as collectors, and we still are collectors. I mean, I think in this past like month, I've probably gotten 7 or 8 packages in the email or in the mail of works that we've been purchasing and things of that nature, or books. I'm like a total book nerd, but our whole notion as collectors are, we don't have kids. We've spent a good number of time on collector committees and various things with LACMA and MoCA in the past, and, you know, with all the museums that we work with, I always tell them that, hey, my wife and I have a pretty sick collection that's definitely a moment in time. We're, you know, attempting to have this like snapshot of, like, in the grand scheme of things, we're both in our early 50s right now, so I would say from like 2000 to 2030, 2040, let's hope, we're going to have a pretty insane, amassing of just like the scene as it developed. We've never sold off anything. We've never traded off anything. We've never auctioned off anything. Thankfully, knock on wood, because we haven't had to, but and hopefully we won't need to, and we definitely will never want to. So the whole notion is to kind of keep it together as this like archive to present to a museum, to show them like, the wave of, almost the arc of how this new contemporary movement grew and became a worldwide phenomenon, and mixed and merged and, morphed with, other classic long-standing genres like graffiti and street art and everything else that's become under this umbrella of new contemporary/contemporary art in the 21st century. Just to help add context to it and everything, we have been religiously psychotic. And I think the collector bug in me, now that, I've gotten almost every book in the show catalog that I can over the last 20 years, doesn't let me now stop. So we've got like so many damn books. My wife's like mad at me constantly, and there's every week the stack on the coffee table rises to where she can't see the TV, and she's like, you gotta put some of these away. But it's just what's coming in. And to me, it's like I can give all this with the collection to, a museum at some point, and then it just helps lay everything out contextually and, almost, chronologically for them to be able to, pair up everything with, a lot of our pieces are in books and stuff like that. So it just creates this really beautiful, nice, perfect, I guess, kind of package for them.
But the DNA of Thinkspace is Los Angeles. It's Southern California. And even the way you're explaining these stories is like, it's that moment in time, and taking the essence of that time and evolving it as it goes, as we go on. Could Thinkspace exist in a different market, do you think?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. You had asked me that question in the recent feature. No, I'm happy to expand upon it. If anyone saw that, but regardless, yeah, that's a good question. That was the one that actually stumped me, and that was once in a while when I sit there on the couch and I'll like sit there with my wife and I'll be like, hey, I'm like, because we do a fair number of them each year. I was like, well, what do you think of this one? And she's like, it definitely couldn't. I'm like, I know. It's just one of those things that it's such an important part of our skeleton structure. I don't think, it's definitely become almost like the blueprint for a lot of galleries around the world. Not that they're copying us, and I'm not saying that. I'm not fooling myself. I'm still very blown away when anyone outside of California knows who the hell we are. It's just a really good thing to like lock in with your local, community and have them help lift you up at the same time. And there's always been local artist communities everywhere. It's just someone that plugs into it and figures it out at the end of the day, and figures out how to harness that energy and guides them, and also at the same time doesn't fuck them over, and does right by them. And unfortunately, those last two things seem to be really difficult for a lot of people. Over the years, we've just always kind of held by the mandate of just, do right by folks. Right now, we've got a little bit of growing pains. We've got a number of works that we need to hustle and hurry up and get returned from the last year. But the big move and getting settled at the new space has definitely delayed things a little bit. But past that, we're always on top of our games when it comes to like just paying people on time and, doing the right thing, and still, presenting and promoting works on, social networks a month or, a few weeks into the show, even if they've already sold. It's just so funny how many artists I'll talk to that, I was talking to an artist the other day that said that her gallery gave her one post, the show preview came out, it sold out, and then she never got another post. They were already on to the next thing. And I'm just like, well, Jesus Christ, you still got to let people know you got the show on view and, hype it up and not be just so.
You got to post that shit months after too. Yeah. I never get that. Like you should post, like people should, it's like, it should be part of your DNA, like you're saying, part of your DNA. Post it, continue to support the artists, even if you don't represent them. Just, hey, this is a great show we had. Like, I think it goes such a long way. No,
and then just also just sharing what they're doing next. Yeah. Because if you still have some stuff, then maybe what is in the new show isn't for, said collector that's getting turned on to them then, but then they're like, oh, I wonder why Thinkspace is promoting it. Oh shit, they've got some rad shit still from, Artist X. Yeah. That's why our inventory is so active. We probably sell about 4 to 5 pieces a week from our inventory. We've been having like a really crazy end of the year just because I think people are bored and there wasn't really a whole lot of Christmas gatherings, so people are treating themselves right now. And God bless that they're supporting, a small gallery with a lot of great artists.
Have you seen collectors change in your time doing this?
Big time. Oh, so much. There's like whole waves. I was talking about this yesterday. I mean, it's funny. I mean, you can definitely look at like this movement that we're in like maybe 3 or 4 stages, with like Robert and his crew being the first stage, and then Ryden and Biscuit and Baseman, Camille Rose Garcia, and everybody being like the second wave. And then like it's hard to argue, or the third wave kind of starts with like artists that, you know, we're starting to get really popular and are still today, like Audrey Kawasaki and Sylvia G, and, you know, that kind of nexus of like right around 2005, 2000 till 2008, when there was like a whole nother little wave that was coming out of Art Center and just everywhere at that point, since the scene was really starting to grow globally quickly, due to the internet, due to Juxtapoz starting to get all traction at that point, and just everything kind of just forming together into a perfect storm. And then right around when, like, I'd say in the last 5 years, last 5 to 7, there's been a whole other like explosion of things on an international level as well. With that, there's been a whole new wave of collectors, especially coming out of Asia, all the Asian countries, with, you know, Hong Kong leading the charge. There's 2 or 3 different new like levels. There's that StockX guy who's just buying for the hype and is going to flip within a year or two, and is looking up to people that have gotten a lot of press in the last few years. But people that are doing that in the last few years have been, you know, collectors for 15, 20 years and did it from a smart perspective and stuff like that. And I think they're just missing that aspect. And there's so many people that are flipping after a year or two that in 10 years are just going to be kicking themselves when they realize how much money they threw away. And with that said, we really try to stay away 100% from anybody that's got a history of flipping, or that we, you know, and now on Instagram, you can just kind of get a feeling for it. I mean, we want to place works with people that are going to live with them and love with them, you know, love them for a lifetime, and then hopefully pass them on to their kids, or, you know, or at least hold on to them for 10 years, you know, without just the sheer intent of, you know, treating an artist as a stock. We have a big show coming up later this year with an artist, and we were talking yesterday about probably doing contracts for the pieces, and it's going to be one of the, like, probably the 3rd or 4th show ever that we've done it, but there's just so much buzz on their work that it's not worth, you know, having half of them, you know, end up on the market again within a year. It's not a good look for the artists. It's not a good look for us in terms of where we place the works. So we're definitely making sure that we're, you know, starting to, you know, be a little bit more thoughtful, and I hate to say blue chip about it, but I mean, sometimes you have to be.
Is that quite commonplace to do contracts?
Not, I mean, at a bigger level for sure. I mean, we own a couple of works there where we've definitely signed, like, you know, you can't resell it for at least 5 years. And that's just an artist protecting their market, you know, making sure that, and it's smart, but it's definitely a, you know, almost like a poker play to decide when to do it, because it can also turn people off in a big, big way. So we've been, you know, weighing this, so to speak. We've done it with, I think, we've done it with 2 shows over 15 years. So we've not done it a lot. I've signed probably 4 or 5 myself in the last 5 years, as we start to collect on a little bit of a different level and enter into like the lower kind of blue chip realms, and, you know, artists like Ini Wamura and, you know, Otani Workshop and stuff like that, you know, starting to deal with some places like Periton and stuff like that, who are definitely more, you know, driven by that nature. And they have to be, because they're dealing with, you know, artists who have become, for a lot of people, commodities, you know, in their, you know, in their book of wealth.
Andrew, I know this is like collecting 101, but I think it's important to tell people what does flipping do to an artist market?
I mean, it shows that they are becoming, I think. I mean, you'll probably get 10 different answers from 10 different art dealers. I guess I can preface that by saying this. But to me, I feel that it skews things in the fact that it does inspire others to do it, which is bad. I think first and foremost, especially if said results from first kind of, you know, foray into an auction is very promising. Like Edgar Plans, for example, recently, I mean, I think he just had a 30 by 30 centimeter work sell for like $30,000 last week on auction, which, you know, you could have got from one of his primary galleries a year and a half ago for $2,500, you know, 2,500 euros. So $3,200, whatever. And I did, you know, literally like a year and a half ago. And it's just, you know, shit like that's baffling, but it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, especially with the the Hong Kong market and the larger Asian market as a whole, there's a lot of young wealth there right now, and these guys aren't listening to some New York art dealer that's in their ears going, stop, stop, you hit the top, like if the quote's like, let's say 60 to 80,000 American, and or even like the recent cause that blew up to astronomical levels. It was just two guys that wanted it. They wanted to have it so they could post it on their Instagram, or have it as that floss factor with friends, and at the same time have an unlimited amount of wealth, so they're not really concerned with what it's necessarily worth,
or the history of the art market, or the history of this kind of stuff. There's no interest in that.
And with the history of just what we're discussing right now, so they don't really see it as a bad thing. And it's and so many people, I think, like the next day are like, oh, well, Cause is selling everything now at $20 million. It's like, no, he still is very smart about how he does things, and is weary of it. But at the same time, every auction that comes out now has a piece from Cause. I have to imagine it weighs on him and his gallerists very heavily in terms of, you can't all of a sudden start to try to charge that for every piece, but at the same time, if every piece is just going to start to flip, thus then comes the blockades and the questions of who else is in your collection, where do you work for, who do you do, and then, you got your legion of art or sales assistants at the bigger galleries, like Googling and checking into every little aspect of your life, almost like you're a politician, to see if you're gonna if you're worthy of this prize, and it's understandable because it really throws things off, and then at the same time, once the demand goes and let's say they're just a flash in the pan and they're only 35 or 40 or even younger, there's many instances we can think of in just the last year of artists that are on their second or third solo, and they've had pieces go for six figures at auction. Definitely a lot of young artists of color are experiencing that right now, and it's because it's the flavor of the week, and folks like Simkowitz and others have created this aura of them being almost trading cards in a way, and it's interesting. I can't imagine what it does to an artist's psyche. I mean, that would be one to talk to, some folks that are on the, right at that level of just kind of getting super crazy, like Nina Chanel or somebody like that is just right at that precipice of just really just going nuclear. But at the same time, still having fairly realistic gallery pricing, but at the same time watching their secondary market go through the roof, but realizing that, you still want to be making art in 10, 15 years, 20 years, and you're only 35 or 40. And at the same time, will that market still be there? And if it dies in 5 or 10 years and you're not the flavor week anymore, is that going to derail your current career that you are focused on? Because it has become so much about, the commodity of art. I mean, that recent special documentary on HBO, The Price of Everything and the Value of Nothing, is just a gem, and I can't recommend highly enough for anyone to watch that, and then watch everything that says you might also like when you're watching that on Amazon, because there's just some amazing documentaries out there that have come out in the last few years that just paint a pretty vibrant picture of how much the bigger art market's just become the New York Stock Exchange, just with a different faceplate.
How's your taste changed?
It's definitely growing with the times. We get often asked how do we curate this, that, and other thing. And the one thing my wife and I most often say is there's just a thin red line that connects everything, and that thin red line usually is that everyone that we work with is at the top of their craft. Our tastes have grown with the times, I guess, because we're constantly getting exposed to new artists. It's not like we've ever decided to go from, works that are focused on, flora and fauna and humans to totally abstraction or anything like that. And I don't see us ever doing that. But we've definitely, matured in terms of the quality of the works. And with that said, I think that's also to do with just the arc of, creatives coming out of things and how the general scene has developed. I mean, we've definitely helped guide some things, I think, over the years. I mean, we were huge into hyper realism, probably 10 years ago, and then about 5 years later, it was everywhere. But no one was really showing it as much as we were back then. I mean, we had a lot of special shows that were based around hyper realism back then. So it's interesting to kind of look back at the past 15 years, and I think we figured out that we've done close to 500 shows. so far. I mean, we've actually got an Excel grid going somewhere, but I mean, in the next couple months, our 500th show ever that we've curated will be coming up, and that's kind of bananas. I mean, in between like pop-ups and, you know, shows at other galleries and festivals and museums and everywhere that we've done shows, and the fact that, you know, for the last 5 or 6 years we've been doing 2 or 3 a month since we've got the project room, and sometimes rock the viewing room / office area too with a little pop-up. So there's a lot to look back on, there's a lot to digest, and it's interesting to see the arc. When we did our 15-year anniversary show in January of last year, we made these huge, with the help of Spencer Little, amazing artist from down in San Diego, we made these huge, like 10-foot tall or 9-foot tall 1 and a 5, and for about a week we just went through all the old postcards, because we've saved a batch from every show, and collaged this really epic kind of, you know, mosaic of all the 15 years of postcards. And it was almost as popular as the other, you know, original works in the show, because we have such a strong following in LA that, I mean, so many people that have followed us from gallery to gallery to gallery, that we've watched their kids grow up, that we've watched their collecting habits change and grow with us, and we've watched them grow old, that it's wild. You know, I mean, we've watched people start to date. We had somebody that got married at one of our shows, proposed in front of one of our paintings. I get a little choked up. And we've watched them have 3 kids and grow and still come. And that's awesome. And their kids have a love for art now. And they're starting a collection for them all. That's awesome.
What do you think then? This is probably an impossible one to say. When you look back on this, and you look back on everything that you've done, not just for within the art side of things, but also the community and the outreach, what do you feel most proud of?
Wow. That's a tough one, man. I think just the fact that we are leading the charge and putting people in the history books and doing everything we can on the museum level, on the institutional level, that's the one thing that cements people's legacies. And we've gotten a number of works into permanent collections, and that's definitely my focus over the coming years. We have some pretty amazing shows coming up with museums that I think are going to be landmark type events for this movement. And I think that's the most important thing we can do.
Now, one of the things that I think you took a huge stand last year, Thinkspace, you guys didn't just put out a press release about social justice. You actively were pursuing change from just you were really at the forefront of pushing for people to understand what was really happening, and taking a stand with your gallery and how you guys wanted to approach what was happening. And did you get backlash from that?
Oh man, still to this day, we are like shadow banned from Instagram. I mean, we have 350,000 fucking people, and you know, sometimes we'll only get like 400 or 500 likes on a piece. Whereas before all this, a low like, and this is all stupid, I fucking hate likes and all that shit in general, but I mean, it's definitely,
I agree,
black and white. It's right in front of us. Yeah, it's 100%. But you know, a low would be like 2,500, and a high would be 5,000 to 10,000. And if we break 2,000 likes on anything these days, it's just like they almost like giving us a gift. Like you can tell it just made it into the Matrix that day, or I clicked the button on the right hashtag or whatever. There's still ways around that, or if you hire a team or something, like, you know, some galleries in the UK do and stuff like that. But it's just, there's no sense in it. It doesn't really mean shit anymore. I mean,
we know who he's talking about.
I mean, if it gets your ego off and gets you hard and happy, fucking go for it, man. Spend your money on a click farm somewhere in India. I don't give a shit. Me, the right people are following us that need to be following us. I still sell tons of works every day on DM and email, and I just don't give a shit.
I'm with you, Andrew, 100%, because we've never bought followers, we've never done that, and you know, I see other sites that have just so many more followers or get so many more likes on things, and I'm like, I know there's something tricky going on here. I'm not for that.
Oh no, 100%. Yeah, that's you know, you got to be pretty naive to think otherwise. But past that, and at the time, man, I mean, daily we were losing thousands at one point. We were gaining thousands. So it was weird. It was like a teeter totter. We'd gain like 2,000 and like lose like 1,900. I mean, but I looked at it as the great cleansing. I've talked about it in many things. Like I have no problem losing fucktards like that. I mean, fuck you, go suck a dick, fucking fuck you if you still support Donald Trump. I mean, right now, if you still support Donald Trump, fuck you. You know, suck a dick. I don't want your money. Fucking, you know, and with that said, everyone, 99.8% of the people that they're fucking collecting would tell them the same thing. You know, that's the thing that kills me. Like, when I'll have somebody like, you know, that is a trumper that, you know, collects somebody who's like, oh, you think the artist backside? It's like, yeah, you want to call them up right now on FaceTime? I guarantee they tell you to suck a dick. They don't give a fuck that you've given them some money. There will be somebody else that's a good human to take their place. And I say that all the time. I mean, I got into so many arguments, some insane one. I had some death threats from total morons. You know, that there was a couple days where, like, the following day at the gallery, I'm like, wow, I wonder if somebody's going to actually come in today. You know, just because people were so batshit, you know, to support this. And at the same time, it just has that whole era, this past 4 years, just awakened things that were always there. But it just emboldened them and things. And the fact that, you know, my partner in the gallery is an artist of color, our longstanding gallery director of, I think, 10 or 11 years now, Ken Flewellen, is an artist of color. I mean, I see firsthand every day how these things, you know, affect grown men, and how, like, when everything was really starting to, you know, go to total shit, when the George Floyd thing happened, how LC started getting scared about just driving home at nights sometimes if it was past dark, because he didn't want to have any altercations with police and shit like that. I mean, that hits hard on you, you know. He's my boy, he's my best friend. And I just said, fuck it, and I snapped, and I just decided that we were going to take a stand, and we just really became one of the main voices, and I started challenging other galleries. I just didn't care. It was time for people to speak up and do something, and we did some pretty amazing fundraising. We did a lot of awareness, and we drove a lot of people away, but at the same time, we woke up a lot of people, and a lot of people to this day respect us for that, and will always do that. I mean, back when marriage equality was a thing, we had a huge pop-up, and we were very vocal. I mean, anytime things come up that are morally relevant and are part of what makes society, and I think are a foundation for the community that we are trying to foster, it's important to have a voice, you know, especially now that we have a big platform, you know. And again, it's not about the fucking numbers. If we lose 20,000 people because I speak up about some racist jackhole, I don't care, you know, because the people that stayed around are on the same side, you know, are on the good side of history. And I think this year ahead, sadly, is going to be kind of fucked with a lot of instances, especially since all these, you know, maniacs are now, you know, upset that their daddy's been taken away from them and they've been spanked for, you know, charging the Capitol when I think they all thought they were going to get like tea and biscuits when they fucking entered and whatnot. It's baffling to me on a number of levels. So we will always be vocal. The whole mask thing right now even is just baffling to me, you know. So we've always been like, you know, you come in my gallery without a mask, I'm going to drag you out by your fucking nose.
So some of it is an awakening of how whitewashed the gallery world is. But is there there's some positives too, because there's a lot of people who maybe now feel more confident to curate more diverse platforms who maybe didn't feel like they could before. And that goes for curators of color, that goes for white curators, it goes for everybody. No,
I mean, there's been awakening with magazines. I mean, everywhere. I mean, even you guys. I mean, it's been, there's more positive that has come out of this than I feel. I mean, that's a hard thing because there's still so much negative that's making it all fucked. But I mean, it's definitely a good thing that there is positive things coming out of it. I guess that's the best way to say it. I mean, there's a lot of definitely, as you said, just awakenings. And the fact that it's finally putting museums and institutions really under the thumb, so to speak, of public, you know, kind of, you know, feedback and awareness. It's good, you know, it's needed, it's necessary. I mean, we have always championed artists of every color and every, you know, thing around the world. I mean, the thing we used to get asked most often is, why don't we show more LA artists? You know, why do you show so many artists from all over the world? And it's like, well, because it is the world, you know. It's like, I don't want to just be another gallery showing just local artists. I mean, we will support and, you know, uplift and you know, do everything we can for, you know, artists locally that we love and support. But at the same time, I mean, it's just, the world's too big to just have a narrow vision. That's why, I mean, we bring in artists from all over the world. I mean, I think we've this coming year, we've probably got artists from like 8 or 9 different countries rocking. Probably more than that, probably 20 different countries now that I'm looking at our list.
Who's the one who got away for you?
Oh man, I can't say.
We promise we won't put it out.
No, just yeah, exactly. We'll stop recording for a minute. I just lost a show like 2 days ago. Yesterday was kind of like an angry, like, just doing projects around the gallery, drinking during the day, type day, and not like staying away from my email and everything like that. So, and it happened like maybe like it happened like an hour after, our first go at this went to shit. I got this like email like, oh, sorry. And I'm just like, what the fuck? I mean, we had just set up everything like 3 months ago. They just signed with the new rep, and, the rep doesn't think we're the right gallery, and blah, 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 blah. And you go and you look at the rep site, and the rep's got like 3 artists you never heard of, been doing it for like a fucking year, like barely 30. And I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. Hey, whatever, man. At the same time, I mean, I'm a fan. I own a couple pieces, and I hope it was the right choice for them.
How do you feel about like LA in terms of a city nurturing young creativity? I don't think we've had a lot of people on talking about this regarding New York, but I can't remember the last time we had someone from LA give a perspective on this.
Yeah, because New York's like set up so differently.
Completely different.
Yeah, so different.
Especially with like the Academy of the Arts and so many different little like things for kids to do out of school and stuff like that. Kids is the wrong word, but just like, fresh young talent to do out of school. Sounding like them whippersnappers. No, so, I mean, in terms of that, I mean, it's definitely much different, and it's much easier for a young artist without a car or a budget to get around in New York. Most importantly, I mean, it's much easier to go gallery hopping on like $5 in your pocket in New York than in terms of trying to like gallery hop in LA. I mean, if you don't have a car and some money for parking and gas and everything that comes with gallery hopping in LA, it's just not going to happen. Not to mention
being sober.
Yeah, it's just yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. Like in New York, you can just stumble around on the subway. Here you can't. I mean, people do. I don't encourage it by any means, but I mean, we definitely see people 3-4 shows later sometimes where we're like, oh wow, okay, when we're gallery hopping around, but we're not drinking anymore because we're old. But regardless, and back to the original question, it's I think it just because it's so damn spread out. It's a little bit harder, and there's just not as many, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it's not on my radar anymore, but there's definitely not as many opportunities as like New York has. And with that said, with things like Create, Fixate, and Cannibal Flower, and those monthly art events that used to exist for a number of years, just being pretty much gone now due to the fact that a lot of realtors don't want to mess with pop-up events anymore due to all the warehouse, tragedies that happened in the last 5 to 10 years. The
thing in Oakland, California really changed a lot in California.
Yeah. To this day, that still impacts creative hubs. I know one just got shut down like right before COVID, which is, I'm going to say late 19, I guess. So weird to think back these days. But I think it was like summer or late 19. I mean, just looking at just like it's the landscape has changed quite a bit, and then with that said, the landscape is so huge and spread out here that sometimes you can be making a noise in downtown and no one really knows about it in the rest of the city. So it's I think one of the biggest. It's definitely the biggest spread out city in the States, and it's a hustle, and a lot more so than any other city that I can think of.
We would be remiss if we didn't mention the new space, and congratulations. It must be the weirdest time to celebrate all your fucking hard work to a space that nobody gets to celebrate in the way that you probably initially wanted them to, but still it's something to be proud of. So how is being proud of something in 2021 during COVID in Los Angeles, which is being hit really hard right now?
No, it's definitely a little bit of a bummer. It's funny when we looked back to, since we've hired a couple publicists to help us kind of get that next level of press and go after a big feature in the Times and stuff. We were talking about when we last moved, and when we last moved, it was the end of 2008, early 2009, which was right in the middle of the recession. So we choose pretty choice times to move.
It's good. It's part of the history.
But I mean, it's just like keeping with things in the past. But it's a really surreal. I mean, we're so over the top, like excited and happy and proud of the new space. I mean, we spent 6 months on it almost daily with a army of contractors during the peak of COVID, getting it ready, and we were kind of forced into the move. It wasn't planned. We were planning to move, but then COVID hit, and we're like, we'll stay at the current space another year. And then literally a month or two later, we found out that the owners of our building that we rent from were going to sell, and our lease was up. So it was just like this, like, well, let's not re-sign for another year or two here because we can't, because the new owners were definitely going to change things and jack up the rent a good bit. And at the same time, we had been feeling already that it was time to kind of get some new bones, give our artists that had been with us and maybe had already done 2 or 3 shows at the old space, just a new, coloring book, so to speak, to create within. And when this happened, we were like, well, we got to now, so let's go find something. And there was this area, warehouse district in LA, that we've always had our eye on, that's just been, kind of just, not developed for a long, long time. And in the past, like during 2019, you started to see it come to life. So we decided to go over there, and we spent a day driving around. We found a spot and fell in love with it. And we've been able to make it everything that we've ever wanted, like vaulted ceilings, skylights, polished floors, just everything that we really wanted, like state-of-the-art lighting and everything. And we've been doing timed visitations for the last couple openings on Saturdays, and we've been able to get a couple hundred people here throughout the day. So it's been nice, but it's not the same as, what we know it could be, especially in this part of LA, to where we have a brewery right next to us, a party beer company that we're going to be partnering with, who are awesome. And I mean, they're literally right next door, and they have a huge patio. Oh, they have a huge patio. They're down to do our after parties. They're going to bartend for us. I mean, they just opened back in March. They're the super buzzy, microbrew in town, and they're good dudes. And so we're like just ready to fucking destroy on so many levels and crush and have a fucking. I mean, I'm ready. Our last opening was March 1st, 2020, with people. It was for James Ballou, and it was we went out on a high note, man, because, I think we raged till 10:30 that night. Doors were supposed to close at 9, and then we hanged out back and partied until midnight with, people from all over the world, because James does the Vantage Point podcast, and heavily involved with Urban Nation over the years, as Evan knows. And so, just every artist, knows him, and it was right after Powwow Hawaii, so everyone was just kind of stopping back in LA before, bouncing all over the world to where they came from. So it was like a who's who of the artist community. It was amazing, and we cannot fucking wait to have that again, to have that back. And I know it's still probably a year plus away.
It's a year. This time next year, we'll be back, baby.
Realistically, and I think even then there's going to be a whole segment of people who have become very agoraphobic and are, not going to be coming out to openings anytime soon. And I have to say, I'm kind of one of them. I'm kind of can't wait, but at the same time think I'm going to be in the back half the night, kind of not trying to freak out.
Andrew, are you going to get the vaccine? I from now on the podcast, I'm going to find the anti-vaxxers. Then...
No. I mean, sure. As long as there's no reports of people growing a third arm in the next couple of weeks, as more and more people take it. And there's been a handful of instances of people reacting to it. Of course. It's millions of people. There's going to be a handful of people. But the ones that freak me out a little bit are the people that have, ended up getting, atrophy on one side of their face and whatever, almost like palsy. That's kind of freaky. But I've only seen it a couple times now. But
sign me up right
man,
now.
Because, I want to get the herd. I want to get the herd immunity going, and let's do this. Let's get back to normal. Honestly, the best thing that can happen is just open season on anti-maskers. Just give them one. You get one fine, and then you get some sort of I don't know, something that alerts you on some detector that after your second fine you just get shot. I'm so sick of it. Especially out here in California. It's so easy, and the rest of the world just laughs at us on a daily, if not hourly basis, because you just have inbred, uneducated idiots ruling the fucking field here and ruining it for the rest of us that actually are fucking, have a third fucking grade education or greater that, know that science is real, and, the earth is round. And Trump is a jackass, and racism's bad, and you don't need a gun every fucking minute of the day stuck up your ass to make you feel safe. And, just come to grips that you have a tiny dick, and your life sucks, and go in a cave somewhere and fucking fuck off.
That was beautiful. To not only run a gallery, but to thrive at a time like this in the art world is no easy task. And it certainly shows that Andrew, Sean, and their team must be doing something right. That's just about it from us, but as promised, here's a bit from Evan and myself catching up after the new year. Till next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great year. Just spent the last hour just looking at sea shanty Twitter. So this guy in Scotland recited a sea shanty on TikTok. Okay. And the internet.
What's a she shanty officially?
Oh, he ba do dee do dee dee do dee do dee dee do dee do. And Twitter and the internet being the internet, it's now just like everyone's like recreating this. It's just turned into a meme. This track has turned into a meme, and now it's like animating in like pictures are now singing it, and it's just I love watching the internet do its thing. You know, when someone does something and it just suddenly takes, like street art does this, you know, it's like, it just takes on this beautiful new life, and you're just sitting there going, like, as a creator of something, just to see it expand, that's the internet's at its most beautiful.
And the funny thing about it is that if you look at one of them, it will follow you forever.
Yeah.
Like now, like it's just gonna follow you.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm here for this little moment of sea shanty memes.
How long does a meme last?
I anything from seconds to lifetimes.
Yeah, I know. It's weird how that works.
Yeah, because
there's some that I see over and over again. I'm like, God, that works so well.
Right, Pepe the Frog. Like that's the biggest example. You know, like just where did that go? Like that's obviously not a happy example.
You know what's weird thing about Pepe the Frog is that I kind of know the artist who did it and like has denounced it. Obviously, like he's not really happy.
Mark Frost.
Is it Matt Fury?
Matt Fury. Maybe that was it. Matt Fury.
Yeah. I still can't quite figure out what it means. I've read every single dissertation and essay. I'm like, how did this happen?
It's just the internet doing its thing, and that's a kind of a horrible example of where you trying to create a character and suddenly someone says, nope, this character is this.
Yeah, it's mine now.
To the point where the originator has to actually kill the character, and then they're like, no, he's not dead. We're just gonna keep using him.
And it's really not that hard to draw, so we can keep making it.
Yeah, you're like, damn it, why wasn't I more refined?